I can't go out like this, you know that.
Well, then his blood is gonna be on your hands then.
Oh, you want to do this? I got into this by myself. I'm gonna get out of it by myself. Where's my money? I got the 4-pounder sitting right here. Don't try nothing funny.
All right, so let us talk about Highest to Lowest, the newest Spike Lee joint from Spike Lee, right? So quick preamble, right? Because if you know, by the way, to do the synopsis for this, right? Because believe it or not, you actually saw this, or I should say, believe it or not, listeners, Ricardo actually checked it out this morning at the time I was recording this. I watched it last night, and I'm still thinking about it right now, right? So as I said with my Facebook post, right, we are almost halfway into the 2020s, right? And we have two Spike Lee joints on the table. We were blessed with two Spike Lee joints here, right? The first one being 2020's The Five Bloods, which was my second favorite film of 2020, right? And here we are 5 years later with Highest to Lowest, right? So what a time to be a film buff, Jen. Think about this though. It's the 2020s trend, and we are still getting Spike Lee joints, right? Even though they're not gonna be they're not gonna be coming out every 2-3 years as as it used to back in the 90s and the 2000s or even the 2010s, right? Because I mean he is in his 70s right now, right? And same thing with his lead actor, Denzel Washington. If I'm not mistaken, I think this is like their 6th outing together, right? Because their first outing was More Better Blues, right? From 1990, right? And remind me that in my review, I'll mention this, right? Yeah, this show actually, believe it or not, pulls from More Better Blues. I was like, okay, Spike, I see what you did there. That was real cool, right? But yeah, quick preamble, right? So, when it came to The Five Bloods, we covered it, when it came out on Netflix during the pandemic, I absolutely loved it. As I said, it was my second favorite film of 2020. I know on this show, we talked about Do the Right Thing. We actually talked about it in 2020 in commemoration of its 21st anniversary. Well, it wasn't so much for its 21st anniversary. It was because of the unfortunate incident involving the late George Floyd, right? And the relevance of that movie because of that, right? 2 years later, we were talking...
And Chadwick Boseman's last film, I think, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes. Right. We also talked about... We also celebrated the anniversary of Malcolm X, you know what I mean? And we both agree that yes, it is his magnum opus. It still remains his magnum opus in my opinion, right? So we have shown the love and support that we could give to the man, the myth, the legend that is Spike Lee, right? But yeah, the mere fact again that we have gotten two films from him in his age, right, and in the 2020s is kind of amazing here, right? But what makes this show very, very special is that this is his latest attempt in putting out a remake, right? Him doing a remake, right? Because last two times he tried, kind of dropped the ball, right? The first one being Old Boy, which I was tempted to watch it, but I still to this day have never watched Spike Lee's remake. I heard so much bad things about it, and I love the original film, right? That is a masterpiece in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
And then there was the what is why the blood the Sweet Blood of Jesus, which was a remake of Ganja and Hess, which I finally watched. Sorry, that was last year actually. And as far as like a surrealist blaxploitation horror film, it works. It's just not a show that stuck with me ultimately. It's just I just enjoyed it for the surrealism, you know what I mean, and just the black experience, but through the lens of this vampire story. That worked for me, right? But it just was the show that stuck with me, right? So I say that because I don't really have any intention of watching the Sweet Blood of Jesus because I don't know what Spike did to improve the story, so to speak. I don't think it even did anything because after he dropped that, nobody was really talking about it, right? And it's really interesting. It's really interesting doing retrospect because back in 2014 he made this through Kickstarter. Now he made that through a Kickstarter fund that he
the whole thing was like this real student film thing. I think he shot it at Blackmagic 2.5 and I don't want to say it beneath him or anything like that, but it's like you could raise a little more money than that, right? Like this could be a little more expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. So those were his second films, right? But I'll also make the argument, right, as a speech through preamble, right? I love this chapter, this final chapter, if you will, of his career, right, where you could see he is going back into his filmography and saying, that one film that I dropped the ball with, I think if I just do another film, I could do this thing better. So, like with the Five Bloods, for example, I saw that as him going back into the war genre, right? So where he sort of dropped the ball with Miracle at St. Anna, because that's a show that I still haven't watched because I heard, it just didn't get any positive reviews at all, right? I heard that it was kind of bad, right?
Yeah, it was one of those things that you didn't, he got called out for like basically being historically inaccurate, and he didn't try to like address this in a proper way. Like I like the movie enough, but like he fight on the historical accuracy thing. Is like it's not historically accurate. Stop that. We're defending exactly. Like just embrace the story for what it is and then move on. Like we do it.
Yeah, and just the fact that he looked to call out Clint Eastwood. I think he did when he did Flags of Our Fathers, which is but what's the other one he did is the
Letters to Iwo Jima.
Letters from Iwo Jima, which is a masterpiece in my opinion. One of the best movies of the 2000s in my honest opinion, right? Yeah, when you call out the man for doing that, Trent, I don't remember the context, but when you call him out on that, you put on this show, like, no, we trying to do, right? So yeah, I saw the Five Bloods and him basically saying, look, I took a L with St. Anna, so let me try again, right? And yeah, I mean the Five Bloods absolutely work, right? But what he did so well, though, instead of like doing a period piece, he just pretty much told a modern war film, right? But yeah, again, touching on the black experience, right? Which for a majority of his films, yeah, that's what made his filmography shine, right? When he did that, right? When he put his own perspective on, modern times in terms of, just being black in America, right? And just in general, right? Just in general, sorry. So when it came to Highest and Lowest now, it's like, all right, I'm gonna try the remake thing again. What I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna pull from Spike. This is Spike talking here, right? I'm gonna pull from one of my heroes, Akira Kurosawa. I'm gonna tell one of his stories. So in preparation for this movie here, I finally watched High and Low, right, which came out in 1963. It's my boy Toshiro Mifune. Absolutely love that actor. You know what I mean? And yes, when it came to Akira Kurosawa, yeah, Toshiro Mifune was to Kurosawa what Denzel Washington was to Spike Lee, right? He was just that go-to guy, and when they make movies together, it's just pure magic, right? But yeah, High and Low really surprised me, though, and I love me a Kurosawa film, right? But yeah, there's still a lot of Kurosawa films that I still haven't watched, right? And I feel ashamed, though. I feel bad. I was like, boy, I could have seen this, right? But yeah, the story that was told there was great. I will bring it up in my review here. But what I will say, though, is that I did not expect the show to be this dense, this layered, this detailed in terms of the story and the conceit and whatnot, right? And in particular, with that second half, though, it was dark, though. It was grim, right? Yeah. Because it's touching on, social issues. It was like the social classes there at the time in, post World War II Japan, right? And how Kurosawa did that, though, was kind of brilliant, though. But yeah, it just went into this dark direction, though. And then when it came to the final sequence, which I will talk about in my review here, yeah, boy, that was pitch black in my opinion. I was like, wow, boy, like, that's where you're going. Okay, right? But I love, though, how Spike flips that in this version here, right? And in particular with this version here, he does say, what? I'm not gonna be dark as that film was, right? I'm gonna be a little light-hearted, though, but at the same time, I'm gonna be pulling from stuff that you know of me, but I'm still gonna show that, look, I'm still hip, I still know a thing or two about the times and today's era and all that kind of stuff, so I'm still gonna entertain you, I'm still gonna give you a modern, up-to-date story, but at the same time, I'm gonna remind you why I am one of the GOATs, and that to me is what Highest and Lowest was, right? So at the end of the day, he did not remake the film shot for shot, beat for beat, but he pulled from it, right? He drew inspiration from it, told the story pretty much the way how it was in the original film, but gave it his own spin. And to me, that's the genius of this movie, right? Because yeah, I mean, the man have the filmography to back it up, right? Like, this man has been in the game for decades now, right? Over 4 decades now, right? So yeah, he could pull something like this off, right? But yeah, pre-ramble is done now. But yeah, Ricardo, take it away. I should say, you can use this to kickstart yours, right? So one thing, if you remember, do you remember how you felt about the Five Bloods when you thought about it now? What you feel about him going back to the remake route, and also did you see Akira Kurosawa's High and Low in preparation for this film?
Right. Yeah. So the high and low. I kind of halfway on this because I never read the original King's Ransom novel. Back there, I was actually looking for it to give it a read for this, but I couldn't find it. I couldn't find a good copy anywhere. These on the usual the legal routes, I should say. So that was that. But I know High and Low originally, and I enjoyed that. But I only watched it once, so like a film class, I remember. So that was about it. That's the connection to it. So because this film felt a lot like the novel. It didn't really feel like the Kurosawa film too much. Um, in my opinion. Like that's what I was thinking about it. And that's what I heard. And I went in with this with real trepidation. Well, for two obvious reasons. One, Old Boy, because that was terrible. And then two, yeah, a couple of people who opinion I generally respect, they kind of didn't like the movie. But I like the movie. I'll just tell you that ahead of time. But I could see the problems with the movie. Like that's my main kind of concern. Uh, we'll get into that. But it worked. It reminded me of a couple things. I felt ironically, I'll get into this review, but this might be the hottest take of the review. But I'll get into something involving Denzel himself. And why I don't think he works all that well in this. But we'll get into that. Yeah. Yeah, we could get into review now, I suppose. I liked it for what it was, mostly because I had super low expectations. Like, let's admit that, right? Uh, very, very low expectations going into this. I didn't, again, because of old boy, I was like, hey, boy, you really getting a old boy part again, but again, this nonsense, boy. Worrying about that, right? That was my main concern. Um, but that was about it. So I wasn't thinking of anything else. And just, all right, Spike, what you going to give us? What you going to try? You going to give you a mess? Not sure. And then we end up getting a somewhat smarter film, mostly because of the good performances. I had some genuine problems with like the film structure and what was shown and what wasn't shown and how I felt certain things should have been addressed. But for the most part, I was digging it for what it is and what what you're trying to go for. It mostly works, I should say. I'll say so before we get into the review proper. I wanted to love this, but I only kind of liked it, and it worked better than I expected because of the super low expectations. That's about it. But I felt as it is, it could have been a much better film. At least him trying to do something a little more interesting for what it was. That is about it. Yeah, I could start from there.
All right, so this could be a little bit of a debate here. All right. But yeah, Ricardo, if you don't mind, yeah, what's the story about?
All right, so David King, played by Denzel Washington, is like a media mogul, mostly music mogul type figure, right throughout. Mostly gets bones in the 90s, bringing up his career. His son starting up with some basketball career, and the son and his friend, doing thing. He shares the son's friend is also the friend of his driver. I forget the character's name, played by my boy. He's an ex-con. He was in Rikers for a while, but he have like very, very poor. He have nothing, and basically the story starts with the two of their sons being kidnapped, and then one of the sons are released and comes back home. You'll find out which one if you watch a movie, and that starts the real central conflict of the film. And then starts a second conflict involving, poverty and class, and you get into all these other things. And it's pretty good performances throughout. That's to go with. As I said, there's a lot to like in this, and again, it was like just getting obvious bad stuff out of the way. Well, I should say, like just getting good out of the way. This is definitely not as bad as Old Boy. It's not Old Boy.
But of course that this coming from somebody who still haven't seen it, huh? But kind of curious, kind of curious.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Old Boy, if you don't know anything about the original Old Boy, you might like Spike Lee's film, maybe. Like, I know people who just don't know about it, but sorry to say, it get it's next to impossible to not compare it. So that's the problem. However, but yeah, this was okay. Like, I have genuine problems with it. Some issues with structure. Comedy. Some of the narrative beats don't work as well as I felt it could have. Given what he was trying to go for. And then the little things like who should be telling what and why. And then, the main problem with the film, number one problem with the film, is the actual messaging. Like, it's not super problematic messaging, but it's such a generational thing that we'll have to get into as it is. But yeah, we are getting to that. As I say, that is the real debate, I think, to this, right? Because it's such a I could see a total generational angle to this in terms of like who doing what kind of music should be done, and blah blah blah, blah, blah is all of that, right? But yeah, I dug it for what it was. It set up a good. The central conflict is very good. Like especially, I'm sorry, Jeffrey Wright. I was trying to remember. He is very good in this. Kind of hot take. This is not the hottest take, but he would have probably worked as a lead, maybe. Not sure. If it wasn't for if Denzel wasn't there. But like what we get with him is great. Yeah. But I just well, the hotter take is yet. I'm gonna slightly say it. I think somewhat Denzel is slightly miscast in this.
Okay.
You know, I hard pressed to think who would replace him. Because in my head, a hypothetical version of this movie, I could see Chadwick Boseman being the head. Because they do, and I'll tell you why it think because they have this big action nonsense at the ending, which I find just really falls flat. That all of that those beats don't work at all for me. None of that, and I felt like I played that out a little better now. For what it was, right? It kind of remind me, and but while I'm thinking of Chadwick Boseman, it kind of remind me of one of the last films he did was 21 Bridges. Now there's a sequence in that that's very similar to a sequence in this. That's why I was immediately thinking of that now. So that's about that. It's not like it doing something more interesting for what it is, as it is, but like I just think the chemistry not as strong, and I really felt like it could have been someone else as another actor, another older actor, but I don't know. Denzel just didn't feel like he fit in this. Like it's Denzel and it's his chemistry and whatever it is. And Denzel is one of those characters who kind of typecast into himself. Unfortunately, I think so. At least I think so. But it just I don't know. This just didn't work as well as I felt it could have. Another problem is like the editing. It have too many long running musical sequences that just do serve a purpose. That one sequence at the end that's fine. Involving A$AP Rocky. And A$AP Rocky I felt should have been featured more than this. So again, that is more a matter of structure and who meet what. But I get the like I kind of get or at least tolerate the intention of the story and what it was trying to say for that with respect to that. That's why I don't really have the biggest problem with some of this as it is. But yeah, that is about that. Yeah, I wished we got more. I don't know. Like in my head, I was like, I wanted this to be bigger. I wanted more from this in a sense. Like I don't hate it, but there's something about it that just missing and just kind of falls flat. And I understand where certain people who don't like the movie kind of coming from. Like I get where they're coming from with respect to the complaints. And then we could get into like the core conflict, which is is some old man yells at Cloud a little bit. Kind of vibes from Spike Lee. He's like, all right, Spike, we get it. I get where you're going for. Thanks. Like, I get that you come from this generation, or you're talking about this AI thing and so on. So like, all right, I suppose I get it. And the character, his conflict and what he do with it, works. But I don't know, like something about it just kind of bothering me. Like it, I think a lot of it don't work, and I really felt like it tied together. I think it's just because I'm now watching movies, so it might grow on me, kind of like with Nope. Like I had to give it a shot. Let's see, I'll give it a rewatch, see if it grew on me. But like as it is, I really felt like I could have gotten something more from this. I don't know what just yet, as it is. But I understand where the person coming from. I suppose it's just because my super low expectations kind of judge, color the movie a little bit in my head. Don't hate it, like better than I thought, to be honest. But I wish we got more.
Right. Well, for me, right. Okay, and I will get to my bad as well, right? So I went in with expectations pretty mid, right? Mid to high, right?
Right.
Because the moment I heard that this movie was making its official premiere at Cannes, I was like, oh, word, okay. And then I heard the great reception it got, but then I also heard that it was getting a limited theatrical release in the States, and then eventually it's going to be on Apple TV. I was like, oh, okay, well, that means that obviously we're not going to get that movie down here in Trinidad, which we didn't. Which is funny because, Inside Man, Trin Cinema in Trinidad, I went to see it, enjoyed the hell out of that movie, but that was back in 2006. I mean, just saying, whatever. And then there was the star there too, but, whatever. But yeah, I waited out, right? But I was hearing a lot of great things about this show, so my expectations were somewhat high, right?
Well, that's the thing. I was seeing mostly solid reviews overall, like not great reviews, but like solid reviews. Like it was like okay, but one person whose opinion I really really like on this, they didn't like it at all. They thought it was terrible, but they were more complaining on the ideology of it, like just the Spike as a old black man kind of tutting young people, and like, yeah, okay, I see what you're trying to do there, kind of. At least I saw I kind of got it from what it was trying to do. But if you're older, black person, you'll probably like it. Like I do think there's a generational thing here, with respect to that. So that's how I feel about it. Anyway, we'll see.
Right. So okay. So for me, when it comes to the bad, right, and this is coming from somebody who watched High and Low like a few days before watching this one here, right?
Right.
I felt that the antagonist, at least his motivation, what he does in terms of the kidnapping, I felt they could have fleshed it out a lot better, right? Because in the original film, there was a societal reason why the guy did what he did. Like he genuinely hated Toshiro Mifune's character. Well, in that film, he was this he was working at this shoe production company, right? And he was trying to basically buy out
No, right.
the company so he could run it better, right?
Right.
And then there was a subplot involving these other businessmen who were in the business, right? And they were
Which
like
we kind of get in this.
which you kind of get through the appearance of the boy Wendell Pierce. So I was like, hey, you in this
Right.
too, all right? But yeah, that in itself they could expand it on a lot more. That and a few other characters
Well,
where
so what it with this? Yes, all right. So what there's just like kudos to Spike, and again, what make this way better than the original Old Boy, right? One of the big failures of his take on Old Boy, in my opinion, was that the original Old Boy worked as a cultural conceit for a lot of Korea, whilst this didn't do. He had New Orleans, but it doesn't reference New Orleans in any meaningful way, at least to me. That is one of the bigger failures of that film. Because if they reference New Orleans as a cultural mark, a touchstone, it would have worked.
yeah, and that's something that his movies are unafraid of doing. Like
Always
he will
do.
just kind of like,
Right.
look, we in New York. I'm gonna show you what's going on here in New York.
Right.
I'm gonna make it just relate to what's going on right now in New York. That's what he does.
So right. This film, not only the business mechanism changes, but he also references New York a lot, and he references cultures of New York in it. I'm get little cameos by little people who are they kind of popular in New York, like Ice Spice or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Also McGill. Sorry to cut you. Also McGill, Princess Nokia was there. She played Aesop.
I know this one.
Right. Well, hip hop artist, but she's kind of branch out
Right.
and do R&B and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. She played Aesop wife in the movie.
All right. Okay, that's it. Okay.
Yeah, that's she.
Yeah, because and I had all these little small in jokes, like if you check the apartment numbers, like
What? No, Huss. When I see that, I crack up at that thing, Jen. I was like,
You know?
listen.
do it this way.
Spiker, I know you're a man who's like to throw little in jokes and whatnot, right? I know you're not afraid to throw a little joke, a little visual gag, but oh gosh, man, I laugh at that.
Yeah.
I really laugh at that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, go on.
Yeah. So the central like premise of it and what they were trying to go for. So the update here I find really works actually. It's kind of borderline king of comedy actually at parts. Like if you know the ending to that and how they played this out for what it was trying to do, and it makes sense in terms of the modern industry, a lot of modern like cultures of like shock value and what what this character about and so on and so forth. So that's why I couldn't like it didn't bother me too much. Okay, you didn't need to make it as clear because it relies on the cultural markers a lot better. That's why so that core aspect I didn't have a problem with at all. They make that work, and again because Rocky and Denzel had good chemistry, I felt that also built really well. Like the two clashes they do, the one in the studio and then really end in the last piece, is pretty good. It's good stuff. As it is, I still think again, I imagine a hypothetical version of this with Chadwick Boseman instead. For some reason, but but that it still works as it is. And yeah, I just think that central conceit of the culture thing with compared to the original High and Low actually somewhat works better. Right, it flows better because it's such a central conceit to New York. Like I can't think of shoemaking to Tokyo is compared to hip hop to New York. If you get the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I understand.
Right, and that's why this works, and then like what it is in terms of the modern thing. The only problem, again, this is more rolling your eyes and a generational thing. Like I'll admit, I'm the perfectly wrong age for this movie. Right, okay, if I was younger, I might have liked it more. If I was older, I might have liked it more. But like I just roll my eyes at both sides and who being catered to in what way. But it catered to older people and catered to much younger people somewhat. But I can't remember how this will apply to younger people. Like what young person will like this and what you're trying to say. And it really come across as kind of borderline condescending at parts, to be honest. Like with that, no. But I guess it is Denzel. He's the older black man telling him not to what to do, and Denzel's like the perfect guy for that. To be honest, but I don't know. It was weird. This scene is from Spike Lee's perspective, but it's such a 90s movie in that sense. Like in 90s, it would all work, yeah? But it's like, well, you're catering to older older hip hop stars. Like, why do that? Like, we already know what you could or can't do as it is. Like that conversation done pass, and Spike feel like he just way too late to that conversation, in my opinion. That's how I felt.
Yeah, but for me, like just to go back to like the premise, right? So like when it came to the main character, to Shiro Mifune's character, one thing, like his desire to get the company, right? You really felt it there. So when the whole kidnapping thing happened, it's like, oh my god, like what do I do, right? But there were more consequences, like I'll put it like this, right? Without spoiling too much of the old film, right? There was more consequences to him doing the right thing, in quotes, right? When it came to the company, he ends up losing a lot, right? But then ultimately, it kind of works in favor of the antagonist, right? Because the antagonist's point, well, his goal basically was just to bring down, Toshiro's character down to size, right? In the case of this film here, it was more like, oh, you wasn't taking me on, so I can't do this for you, right? But think about it, right? I don't want to get into too much spoilers, right? I'll get to the good stuff in a bit, right? So he hatches this very, very elaborate plan to pull this thing off, right? And he gets through, right? But then, he slip up as they did in the old film, and then, things kind of get back to normal. And then eventually, the protagonist and antagonist confront each other, right? In the case of this movie here, they meet each other like very quickly. Well, I don't want to say very quickly, but a lot sooner than they did in the old film. The old film, it was near the end of the movie, right? But that's where you get to the final sequence where they finally meet each other. And this is where the protagonist has lost a lot, but he still finds a way to pick himself back up and keep moving, right? But the other guy, he can't, right? And now he gets a chance to pretty much talk down to him and say, look, while you up there in this fancy apartment, I there in the ground, and I looking up at you. And I always felt that was a great little image, right? Where he is literally living at a home where he could see this apartment where, the guy, where the protagonist is living. And look at me, I'm in squalor, I'm in poverty, and look at you rich, and I brought you down to my level, Dread. And literally him saying fuck you to him there, and then we get to that moment, right? But I'll touch on that with the final sequence here. Well, sorry, I'll touch on that with this movie's version, right? So I felt like the antagonist is I felt like the antagonist is the intention of the antagonist wasn't really properly fleshed out. It just felt like, I do this thing, really elaborate, I get through it. Okay, I drop the ball, things happen, all right. But now I meet the guy who was trying to humiliate, and I know acting like if, oh yeah, it's cool, man, it's kind of cool. Yeah, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, and especially in the end, it's like, oh yeah, we cool. No, the point is, he was supposed to humiliate the guy. That'd be like, oh, let me just do this deal, man. We could be friends now. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, man. Like, really?
No, that's a cynical modern take on it. Like it to me, it's that's why I say there's a little bit of comedy in this. Like it works out in his favor because of the conceit of the aesthetic. That's what I say. The aesthetic changes it, and to me it was smart making it the update, to be honest. Like, because it's hip hop, and hip hop is about crime aesthetic and your whole street with a street cred or whatever it is. That works. Like that's why this is not that bad. Compared now to the original thing, which is what shoe sales, man. It doesn't have anything to do with the criminal or the world or anything like that, or even the appeal to crime as an aesthetic. You get my point?
Yeah, I do. And just slight spoiler as far as the old film goes. They even bring up like drug abuse, because like when they bring in the whole heroin subplot, like whoa, like okay, Akira, we go in there, okay, and that led to like some of the film's most darkest moments. Slight detour here before we get to your thoughts, right? All right, so two things, right? While I was watching High Low, I could understand historically, like contextually, why Spike loved this movie so much. For one thing, there's a scene where it's basically like a nightclub scene, right? Where I am seeing like at least two black people in this movie, Dread. I'm like, what? Like, we're in Tokyo, Dread. Like, I understand it's post-war stuff, right? But you see black people like in the audience, that's right. And then there's also, just going back to the whole drug subplot thing, there's a moment where a character goes into this drug den, and just how it was lit, how it's framed, all that kind of stuff. I was thinking about, if you remember, another movie, Jungle Fever. Remember that moment where he went to find, Samuel Jackson, and, Halle Berry was there, and he had, Stevie Wonder song, living just enough in the city. And it's that very, very freaky, terrifying moment where they're in the drug there, they just seeing all these crackheads there. I was watching, I saw that moment, when I was watching High and Low, sorry, I saw that scene, I was like, oh, that's where Spike pulled that from. I see what you did there. I could see why Spike is such a Kurosawa fanboy. You could tell like he was very influenced by this movie, especially in terms of the socio-economic angles that he was touching on in that movie, right? But yeah, I could see that in that film. So I get where you're coming from in terms of the updates making a lot of sense. So I just felt with the antagonist and his intention, it was just like, oh yeah, well, I did that kidnapping thing, but here's what, look, like, let me just do this thing and, water the bridge there. Like, I felt they kind of, like, they expanded on that just a little bit. But
it had no reason. It had no reason to expand on this. I don't know. Like, it to me, it just, it told itself, as I said, yes, Rocky they could have done more, like, in terms of showing Rocky. But to me, it was just him bouncing off a Denzel. That's the point. Like, they could have there's a lot of tell don't show in the movie, to be fair. I do think so. Like, they could have done a lot more with that, right? And I said, because Jeffrey Wright's character and what happened with him focuses thing, they could have done more with him, in my opinion. But I don't know, like it mostly works the way it is. But if it had cut down a little better, it might have worked. Maybe, not sure. But yeah, it's a little muddled there, to be fair. But I think it mostly works. It's fine. Given that you're doing because of the angle, it's not just some random businessman. They focus on a hip hop music mogul, and especially him. What kind of legacy you want to think, and especially with his meta big conflict as it is, he gets stuck. Trying to buy back the business. He didn't need to do that. He'd have been in a worse situation anyway. Going forward, and so on and so forth, right? He make a bunch of like bad decisions in terms of his own selfishness, and I like what they do there. I actually like a lot of that because that had its own really interesting conflicts for what it was. And I don't know, it's in many ways it gels together a little better than the original, like in that sense, no.
Right.
That's what I see. Again, I'll give it a rewatch and find out if this holds up as better in my head. But I think it works. It mostly works. Yeah.
And other nitpick I had with the movie. Yes, even though Jeffrey Wright was great in the movie, I love how he just played this. And of course, him being the ex-convict. Of course, he Muslim, right? Of course, he Muslim. But whatever. But how he played, especially when things got tense, I thought that he nailed that well, right? And that's the dynamic between him and Denzel, especially when it came to getting back at the kidnapper, I thought was great in my opinion, right? So all that being said, the picks aside though, I absolutely enjoy this movie. It is not a perfect
I dug it.
film. It's not, I would not say it is one of my all-time favorite Spike Lee joints though, but it is, I would say, one of my favorite films to out of him to come out. Let me just say, out of his 2010s to now era, right? So like I would say like I'll put it like this, like prior to the show, to the Five Blood, the last film he put out was Chirac, right? Which I saw once and I enjoyed for what it was, but I never had any reason to go back to it, right? Maybe if I should watch it over, I'll be like, alright, I get very the satire still work, okay, alright, well.
Right. So Chirac was just a weird call, and I appreciated it for its weird callness. That's why I appreciate the movie. But Chirac, I could see why if you could hate Chirac. But then again, the same thing with Sweet Blood of Jesus. The thing with Spike Lee is like Spike Lee is still a kind of ascended fan, but much like with plenty people who come a little before, say Kevin Smith or even Tarantino. He never evolved. No, I won't say evolve, but he still just feel like a film student that never grew up, kind of thing. No? Like, like it's
you know what I feel like to me? He's kind of remind me, believe it or not, of Martin Scorsese, right? Which, yeah, I mean, when it comes to his career, he owe a lot to that man, and he owe a lot to Scorsese, right? Especially with the love of New York that he's put in his movies, right? But yeah, you could tell like he and Scorsese come from that. Yeah, we had film school, but we also went to screenings of classic movies, right? We didn't have the luxury of rented VHS tapes or watching TCM and watching movies there. We went to the cinema. We saw the big movies from David Lean and Akira Kurosawa. So you could tell like those classic movies mean so much more to them than to us, for example, who could just pull it up on a streaming platform and watch it, right? So you could tell, it's a different level of fandom that Spike Lee does bring with his films. You could tell,
Right. And so that's how I feel. My main point is that how I feel about him, like building on older conceits or older premises makes sense. Like, but I think it updates reasonably well. Like in terms of like what the film works, it works. It mostly works like it as it is, because it ties together particularly well. The only problem, as I said, is the generational divide, and it feels a bit outdated. Like, to be honest, like it's like they sort of do gangbusters in the 90s. If this had come out, even if it come out in the 2000s, it would have done great. But by the time you cross 2010 or so, it's like, we have this conversation already. Like in terms of age, and I know we having this kind of new revival of, well, if hip hop stars can be old and still pull it out, with Eclipse, for example, the album and whatnot. I don't know. Like it was weird. It's a weird conceit, and it not too baffling, but there's a lot of it. Really gets I really get an old man yells at cloud stuff with this, like, and it doesn't really work as well as he thinks it does. Like, you really think he cook with some of these ideas, and I'm like, it's much strike. However, we'll find out.
Yeah, so that's a really good quickly before we wrap things up, right? So for me,
Yeah.
yes, you are right. This feels like old man Spike, telling the story here, right? I love that he still injects a lot of modern stuff elements into it, and what that's like he, is out of tune with what's going on around him, right? Especially New York as well, right? For one thing, there's a nice little actually a brilliant moment with like this this beast ball, like a group of beast ball fans, right, going to Yankee Stadium, and it's all about Boston sucks, all for the New York what is the New York Yankees? Is the New York Yankees, right?
Oh, no, it does baseball, right? Yeah, because I keep talking, they keep referencing like, oh well, you need to tell you how Boston sucks because it's such a New Yorkie film, kind of.
Yeah.
But then we have a whole slowdown sequence with just celebrating like Puerto Rico or something like that. Like,
no, you need to get about that. I was watching that. I was telling myself, wait. I hope he not get into some indulgent territory here. You know what I mean? Like I hope he not going there, right? Because I was wondering why he was going to stop and zero in on this Latin American festival thing, right? And man points for the cameos. We're not gonna see who it is, right? But the cameos were on point. One was very, very, very on the nose, but I was like, whatever, all these friends I get, and all their appear together. Okay, right? Okay, I get, right? He's still probably no mad over she. That's all I'll say. That's the biggest spoiler I could give, right? But how they work in the I love how they adapted from the old film, right? The idea of the hero with the briefcase with the money, or knapsack, whatever it is, with the money. But how that worked into the festival, I thought was brilliant, in my opinion. Especially the use of music and, just how they was building tension, right? So for one thing, just to get back to, why I think it works, right? Well, Spike with his age and whatnot, right? Yes, it's a very old-fashioned movie, right? It feels very old-fashioned in terms of how it's set up and whatnot, right? There's a lot of like slow, quiet moments. No, they did not get Terrence Blanchard to do a score for this, like how he did for Inside Man, but it still has that horn assisted stuff that you heard in that movie, right? And his previous works in movies like Do the Right Thing and Mo Better Blues and stuff like that, right? But the guy who they pick, I forgot his name right now, right? I thought that his score was solid. Like I could tell, like, he's leaning towards Terrence Blanchard territory, because Spike Lee he love horns. He's a horn man. He a horn man. You love it. That's what you get, right? But I thought that his score was great, right?
Yeah, mostly with the soundtrack is it more I get a lot of like just just do some classic, like not hip hop but hip hop sampling. So they reference Get Down, but it's the original sample for Get Down.
They play a couple of James Brown cuts. So they play Big Payback. They play The Boss. That would be the song, The Boss. Right. Yeah. And how it's worked in is both badass but funny at the same time too, because given the context, it's these old guys who playing tough. They're like, oh yeah, we strap man. But that's the joke. That's the point. And I love how they play on that. That was really good. So yes, it's very old fashioned. It has this sensibility to it as well too, because, and listener, like I am genuinely not gonna knock Spike for this, right? But even though at times it could feel very, feels very outdated, like, oh man, we just gotta remind you how important it is, man, to make it to your 70s and still have your family with you, and we need to show you about family love and all that kind of stuff, right? Yes, I could understand that, right? But we are not in our 70s, so we can't relate, right? So I cannot knock Spike for being, injecting a little bit more emotion into his work, right? So when there are these like quiet, like moments of dialogue amongst family members, for example. Yes, it's very warm, it's very emotional, but it's never sappy, right? It could have gone into sappy directions very easy, right? But I like that, Spike and his screenwriter, I forgot the guy who actually wrote the script for this, right? I like that they didn't make things too overly sappy, right? It's very warm and sentimental, those moments, and when it needs to be serious, that's fine, right? So I can understand, this is made for people within his generation, right? Who make it to the 60s and the 70s and just want to kick back and relax and watch a movie, right? And also like how relaxed it is. It's very jazzy, right? Very smooth. It has a nice flow to it, right? Compared to how dark, the original film, right, was, right? But interestingly, right, while that original film played out more like a police procedural, this one actually, compared to the original one, leans more on the protagonist. Because there's a moment actually in the old film where the protagonist is kind of pushed aside, and this is where he's pretty much kicked out of the company, right? Because of his involvement with the kidnapping and all that kind of stuff, right? And then it just leans on these policemen trying to find the kidnapper, right? And then you find out who the kidnapper is, and then there's this chase, and it leads into the drug den and blah blah blah, right? But this one, because Denzel is the star, they kind of have to hold in on him and Jeffrey Wright's character a lot more, right? That being said, though, I think the biggest surprise for me, boy, was Flacco himself, boy. A$AP Rocky. That man surprised me in this, right? I'm not saying that he gave an amazing Oscar with the performance, boy, but given who he is or who we know him as, though, I thought he fucking killed it, Jed. He was great in his role. Just that back and forth between him and Denzel with that studio sequence, though, from start to end, I was riveted. I was clapping. I wasn't clapping. I was laughing at it. I was like, oh, it's just real dready back and forth. Especially there's a moment where a character references some NAS bars and how he brought it up. Right. I was like, all right, yes, this is what I want to see, Dread. But dog, A$AP was natural with it, though. That's what I love. The man just brought his charisma. He brought the game with it too. I like that he was not half-assing anything at all. The man was in a Spike Lee film. It's like, look, yo, I know you're doing your hip-hop thing since 2013, whatever, but look, you're not coming in here to just half-ass and snooze through your performance. I wanted to bring your A game, and I thought that man did it. And he is quite believable, Jed, as this guy who just wanted to make it big. He wanted to get David's attention, and he didn't get through, and so he just hatched his plan, right? But this another minor nitpick, right? This is a slight spoiler. Man had a crew, though. The man was working with a crew, and you never saw the crew after that. Right. In the old film, they kind of justify, these other people who was working with the kidnapper, these are who they are, and these are why they were working there in the first place. This one, like A$AP had a crew, a group of men working with him, Dread. I assume they men, but like you never see them afterwards. It's like, wait, what happened to them? Like they could have take a little 5 minutes to show me what happened to them. You know what I mean? At least in the old film, they kind of justify why the kidnapper got the crew to work with him in the first place to basically kidnap a kid, right? But this one's like, well, no, we don't care.
Yeah, again, this is one of those changes that you didn't need. Like you didn't need to reference that or care because it's about him. And I thought it's the actual like clash in the studio was pretty good, but like the actual getting there was a little silly. Like there's just like point a gun at the guy, he just run away, like just so like nothing.
I know, although that had me cracking up. Right?
Yeah.
And quick thing I want to mention too, right? I know you had an issue with the action sequence. I'll call it. Well, let me just say chase sequence. That's what I'll call it, right?
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it. It was entertaining. That's the best way I could say it, right? I was like, okay, like on surface level, right? Okay, so you wanna show me a man in the early 70s running down a guy in the early 30s, and you tell me he could catch up to him real quick, and then you have this drama with the subway and all that kind of stuff. Okay, right? But I was still having fun with it. It was a fun moment, and I enjoyed it. That reminds me, speaking of subway, right? There is a shot with the subway and the bag. I saw that. I was like, I fucks with that scene. That scene so hard. But I was like, wow, Dre, that shot alone. I was like, yeah. But yes, there are moments where you had to kind of suspended disbelief a little bit, right? So, couple things and then we wrap up here, right? I do like how the show gives its cast moments to shine, right? Like case in point, the actress, I'm not familiar with her name at all, right? Who plays Denzel's wife, right? If I'm not mistaken, I think she appears in the Godfather of Harlem series with Forrest Whitaker, but believe it or not, I never sit down to watch that show as yet. I will, hopefully I will, but yeah, I thought that she was great. I like the son as well. Not familiar with the actor at all. I like the moment that he had with Denzel, and because it's Spike Lee, they could get with it. It's a long take. I thought it would. Cinematography, great as well. Spike does the thing where he will always have these random photos and portraits there, but they're always there to serve a purpose or tell give a message. Like there's one with Kamala Harris. I was like, all right, well, and especially given the fact that we are given time to see, it's like, oh, okay, Spike, I see what you did there, but this is pure Spike Lee, right? So, and even does the thing where he will show you 2 takes of an action taking place, like you'll see like 2 characters kiss or hug, and then you just show another take, but it kind of gives you pressure, like, almost like it was a goof, but it's not that, and he actually did that since school days, but I know he did it specifically with Do the Right Thing, right? So I love that he's pulling from his old bag and showing you things and whatnot, right? I could see people having a bit of an issue with the editing as well too. Like I would say like the first 20 minutes or so, like the first act takes a while for the story to pick up. Like it really takes a while. But then when the kidnapping takes place, like, oh, okay, right, now we're on track, right? I think if I'm not mistaken, in the older film, it takes its time too, but I felt like in the older film, the kidnapping conceits happen a little faster compared to this one here. This one kind of takes its time, and you're kind of like wondering, okay, where's the show going? But then when it happens, like, oh, that's what we got, right? And that's lastly, right? Oh, and also, this is not a nitpick though, but you might laugh at me for saying this, right? So while I appreciate the fact that Miguel Princess Nokia get a little time to shine and whatnot, plus Ice Spice get like about a minute of screen time though. Like what was that, Joe?
Right. Yeah, it's just a hang thing. Whatever, small thing. I thought his son was talking about too.
I thought so too. I thought so too.
Yeah.
And speaking of that person, right? And no lie, forgive me, folks, I am that guy, right? Yeah, right after I see that show and I saw her, and I was like, all right, I followed she on IG, Jen, because yeah, she's actually an unsigned singer. She right. Is legit who she is in the film, right? She is this unsigned singer who could really, really, really sing. And that moment where she performs the song actually reminds me, believe it or not, of the performance of the theme song for Mo Better Blues. It reminds me of that. And it's a similar kind of way with the piano and all that kind of stuff. It's like a character kind of stops to sing the song. It reminds me of Mo Better Blues. I thought that was really interesting how he even pulls from his old catalog, right? What Spike does, right? But to me, Dread, where the show really, really, really shined for me, Dread, was, believe it or not, his reinvention of the final scene from High and Low, Dread, which involves the protagonist and antagonist seeing each other face to face, right? The final face off, right? The context of it is a little muddled, and you could kind of nitpick it and be like, oh, well, realistically, it wouldn't play out like that and this thing and that thing. But I was like, all right, this is a show. It's not meant to be 100% real, but whatever, right? But I could see some people nitpicking it and saying, oh, an artist, a rapper wouldn't say. A rapper would probably say that. Let's give a name. Like you could see like sort of parallels to kind of like what going on with Young Thug and Gunna and them like that. But I don't think it's supposed to be like that.
The character name is literally Young Fellon.
Young fella, right? On the news.
But here's the thing, again, right? it's such a old man complaining as a clout because he like, oh well, he tried to frame it as if, well, streams on Spotify and blah 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 blah. Like he framed that as like bad. Like, well, yeah, no, it's how a lot of people bullshitting about that. But
yeah,
like,
especially Gunna right now, like with the okay, right. I would admit, right, as we wrap up here, right, I would admit, right, I'm not, it's not that I don't care, I just don't have the mental energy to keep up with this whole Young Thug, Rico, Slang Gang case thing, right? But the stuff with Gunna and what they say about how streams were bought in his favor, that kind of that caught my interest. Is the idea of buying streams to for an artist who already in hot water with the label that he aligned with, right? Yeah, that kind of catch my eye, right? But I thought it was really interesting that he kind of brought it up here, like, hey, I'm in this position and my music is charting now because of how much streams I get. And I thought that was like really interesting how he brought it up, right? But the point again now with this, right, is how they were able to recreate that scene, right? Even though it's different, it's a different context in terms of what the antagonist want from the protagonist, right? I like that, right? But the ending of that sequence was almost, like, I would say almost a recreation of what happened at the very end of the movie itself. And I thought that was brilliant, how he was able to play it out, right? Last thing I'll say, in terms of blocking, in terms of camera work, perfection.
Love it. Yeah, love it.
Perfection, in my opinion. That is Spike Lee just saying, listen, I am in my early 70s, but I know my shit, I know my shit. I know a thing or two. I could tell, like, this is him really saying, listen, I know all this talk shit about old boy, right? But listen, I gotta really do the remake thing properly here. And I could tell that I felt like he knocked out the park here with this one, right? So at the end of the day, for me, I love this film, right? But in no way am I saying that this is like one of the greatest Spike Lee movies ever made, right? I would say, as far as like this new era of his career, I would say from the 2010s up to now, this is one of the best that I have seen, right? I like the fact that he still has that, and I think for me why I love it so much though is the energy that he puts into the film, right? Even though, yes, you have your quiet, sentimental moments that you could tell is like, yeah, it's for the older crowd, blah, 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 whatever, right? But he still has that youthful energy that he puts into his films, right? And yes, he pulls his tricks, like he does the character on the dolly track thing. He does that. But that's what I was like, all right, Spike, you could resist it. But when he did it in this movie, like, all right, Spike, you really could not resist that one, right? But yeah, I love that he is pulling from his old bag when it comes to this. And yeah, pretty much saying, this is how you should do a remake. This is how you should do a remake, right? Make it your own. Pull the original story, but twist it, and, well, not really twist it, but basically put your own spin on it, right? And make it modern, make it fresh, make it relatable, make it contemporary. And yeah, you'll get something like this, right? But I could see some people watching this and thinking, nah, it's just a old man trying to be young. Try to do young people, trying to cater to young people with the whole rap thing, blah, blah, blah. And he ain't know nothing about the rap game and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff.
Not so much that, it's just more like he talking down to it. Like, so it came across like him referencing the 90s and that kind of stuff. I don't know, like, it was weird.
I understand. And I guess if I really think about the conversations that Denzel and ASAP have in the film, I could I'll more or less understand exactly where you're coming from, right? But because I was just enjoying just that back and forth, right? Especially how pissed. No, this how it's just the cockiness involved, though. When is the two of them involved, though? That just had me roped in, right? But yeah, ever so often you'll hear a line like almost like is Spike Lee saying, "Yeah, I know more than you young people do." Right. It feels like that, right? But whatever. But yeah, for me, I absolutely enjoy this. I guess for me, it's just because I went to my expectations high, right? So for me, I'm gonna give this a strong 4 to a very light 4.5 out of 5. This is one of the best films I've seen all year. I can't say right now if this is gonna be a top 10. It may not be a top 3 like how the Five Bloods was, right, back in 2020, right? But I still enjoy this. I am really loving this era where Spike Lee is, this creative era that he's in. And boy, here's hoping that we don't have to wait until 2030 before we get the next Spike Lee joint, right? But yeah, I really enjoy this, right? But I could see some people not liking it, not just for the Spike Lee isms, but just the fact that it is Spike Lee at his age, talking about this stuff as if he should know better compared to the new generation who, for all we know, probably now being introduced or reintroduced into his work in the first place, right? I mean, he's not like how he was back in the late 80s where he was like this boisterous filmmaker in his 20s who really wanted to say something about the black experience, right? But I like that, here in his age, he still has something to say, right? And he has the bravery and courage to say it in his own way, and I can't be mad at that, right? Even though, at times there might be stuff where it's like, maybe rethink this a little bit clearer. Maybe rethink this a little bit more, right? And that's all I have to say. Ricardo, final thoughts, rating, what you expect going forward with Spike Lee?
Yeah, I didn't think this was that bad. Again, going in with low expectations, it being a remake and how bad Old Boy was, but this wasn't so bad. I really wished. I don't know. I wish it was. How to say it, boy? I don't know what I want exactly, but I really wish it felt like the conversation updated slightly a bit. It felt like a slightly outdated conversation. But it's still pretty good, and I do think this might be the hottest take, but I think Denzel was slightly miscast in this. Not bad or anything like that, but like just I really wish we got. It could have been somebody. In my head, it could be somebody else. But then I think the person I'm thinking of is really it has been past a hot minute now. So it's like it's that.
Quick question when it came to Denzel. I didn't mention in my review, but I thought that Denzel was great to this, right? But that's to be expected, right? Even when he's in movies
Right.
where he really should be there, like a Gladiator 2, for example, you always know that he will knock it out the park, right? And I like that he has this way, especially with Spike Lee films, right? Where he could be slightly theatrical, slightly over the top, slightly ridiculous, right? Especially with his mannerisms and whatnot, right? But still be grounded enough that you buy into his character, right? Especially when it comes to the moments involving him trying to find ASAP, right? Stuff like that, right? But isn't that he just, because it's Denzel and he could kind of do this in his sleep, you will kind of let down by like almost as if he wasn't challenged enough for the role?
It's probably his age. I think it's the age is the problem. Like it really felt it should have been somebody younger. 'Cause he keeps saying he did this in his 20s. So to me, this person should have been in the 50s. Because it was roughly 25 years. I don't know. It's just that. Like they could have got a younger actor for this because then this is the 70s. So it was at least his age was showing with that. I don't know. I just again, you're still good. You're still fine. But I didn't think I could imagine like somebody like Mahershala Ali or somebody like that. I ain't sure. Well, yeah, some out of 10. I went in expecting much worse, and I got a lot better. I dug it for what it was. But yeah, I wish the conversation was updated for what it is. Whatever, it's not a major complaint. So that's about it.